Listen, I just got off the interview with Dr. Robert Blumofe, aka Bobby Blumofe. Let me tell you something. Super interesting guy. If you're not familiar, he's the CTO of Akamai. If you don't know what Akamai is, go ahead and look it up. But it sounds insane that a company you might not know of, I guarantee you literally used by every known application I can think of. I can't think of anything that doesn't use it. In fact, if you use the internet and goes through a telco, you're using Akamai somewhere. Join us on IT Visionaries. Hear how they started with the hypothesis that this was going to be necessary back in the 1990s, all the way to what they're working on now by bringing more speed, more capacity, and more security to every application that we touch in a perimeterless world. I know it's a buzzword, but find out what he thinks about it next on IT Visionaries. Excuse me. This is your father. Not actually. This is Albert, your host of IT Visionaries. Just wanted to let you know and remind you IT Visionaries is brought to you by the Salesforce platform, the #1 cloud platform for digital transformation of every experience. Build connected experiences, empower every employee, and deliver continuous innovation with the customer at the center of everything you do. Learn more at salesforce.com/platform. Of course, they are our beloved sponsor. They make IT Visionaries go. Give them a click if you're looking to do what they do best. Otherwise, back to the show. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of IT Visionaries. And today we have a special guest. His name is Dr. Robert Blumofe. He is the EVP and CTO at Akamai. Robert, who, by the way, you told me to call you Bobby after I introduced you. Is that good?
Yeah, Bobby's good. Thanks, Albert. Thanks for having me.
All right. Bobby, welcome to the show.
Thanks.
A lot of the world uses Akamai. They might not even know they use it, but I know a lot of the world uses it. But for those who don't know what it is or what it does, Bobby, could you tell us what is Akamai and what does it do?
Yeah, love to. We like to say that our purpose is to make life better for billions of people, billions of times a day, and that we do that by powering and protecting life online. More specifically, if you start looking at our customers, we have thousands of enterprise customers in numerous verticals from e-commerce, financial services, media and entertainment, e-government, healthcare, travel and hospitality and so on. And when we say powering the online experience, we talk about delivering their content and accelerating their applications so that their customers, that is our customers' customers, get a better online experience. And of course, protecting is all about protecting our customers' web applications from cyber attacks, from threats, which includes things like DDoS attacks. It includes application layer attacks. It includes, bots. And of course, most relevantly, recently, of course, protecting our customers from ransomware.
Yeah. And for those that aren't so familiar, how do you make that vision, that promise come to life? Because this is one of those things, like I said, I think just about every product uses Akamai. You may not know it, but you use it. And so people are like, well, how can I use something I don't actively know I'm paying for or something like that? And I was like, it's like, I try to describe it. I do a terrible job, but like content, describing a content delivery network and so on, it's pretty difficult. I wonder if you could share with us, how exactly does it serve and help these many billions of transactions a day?
Right. Well, all of these products, whether it's accelerating applications or protecting applications from cyber attacks, are built on a platform that, in its physical sense, is hundreds of thousands of machines that we run distributed all around the world in 135 countries, well over 1,000 networks, thousands of locations. On those servers, we run a proprietary stack of software that we've developed. And so you can think of this as a layer of functionality that lives in between our customers and their customers. So a user who is going to a web application, rather than interacting directly with our customer's website, the interaction goes through us. And we can mediate that conversation through an Akamai server that is near the end user, Akamai servers that are near our customers. And by running the conversation between the Akamai servers, we can add value, we can accelerate, we can deliver, we can scale, and of course, we can block bad content.
There you go.
Maybe I shouldn't say block bad content, but rather block bad requests, for example, that might be attacks like DDoS attacks or application layer attacks and things like that.
So this is, and I'm going to date you a little bit because we did a little homework and we saw that you joined Akamai in 1999.
99.
For a lot of our younger listeners that, are just entering the workforce, for example, they don't remember what the internet used to be like. They don't remember, they don't remember how long it took to figure, to see even a photo, right? And it was more than bandwidth. It was kind of like what you talked about. There was no way to bring compute loads, anything like that, closer to the customer. It was no way. They had to ping
That's
across phone lines, go across, instead of thousands of computers, it went around 20. It went around a couple computers, had to reach its storage, send it back. I mean, it was a terribly slow process. When you were researching and developing, basically pre-Akamai, how did you see that this was going to be? What did you see that said this is going to be the way of the future? This is how we're going to do it. We're going to bring everything basically closer to the customer. It's like sheer physics alone that'll make the experience faster.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's obviously a long history here, but maybe the best way to do this is to start with the early 90s when I was a graduate student at MIT. I was a PhD student in the lab for computer science, working on the third floor of the building, which is where the theory group was. And our research at that time was really mathematics. It was algorithms, and the focus was on distributed systems, parallel systems, networks, trying to find better ways to move data and store data around on networks. And as algorithmists, as you may know, the focus is always on scale. Algorithmists, mathematicians, we like to study how our solutions behave when the size of the problem gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Mm-hmm. And interestingly enough, I think oftentimes algorithmists are criticized for that, in that the more pragmatic practitioners or researchers will look at that and say, well, your algorithms really only make sense at ridiculous scale. And the reality of the world is that the networks that matter are only tens of nodes, hundreds of nodes, maybe thousands of nodes. Now, anybody who was saying that would have been pre-internet, certainly pre-World Web. But in the early 90s, the World Wide Web had been invented. We had Tim Berners-Lee had invented the protocols. You had the browsers, right? The Mosaic browser had come out of the National Center for Supercomputer Applications, and it was really starting to explode. And the other fortunate thing that happened was that the World Wide Web Consortium moved into MIT. And in particular, it actually moved into the lab for computer science, and in fact, the third floor of the building, which is where the theory group was. And Tim Berners-Lee obviously was seeing his invention really explode, and the theoreticians that he was working next door to were of great interest to him, and that started these conversations. And Tom Layton, who is one of the founders of the company, now CEO, he and his graduate student, Danny Lewin, who had been working on these kinds of problems, founded the company. And they founded the company in 1998 with this idea of using the algorithmic technology that they had developed, building this on distributed systems and using mathematics to solve what was then viewed primarily really as a performance problem. Now, of course, in recent years, we also now see a security problem, and the same sort of distributed systems approach is actually highly relevant for cybersecurity. And that's been a big focus for us over the last 10 or so years. I honestly don't know whether back in the late 90s, whether Tom and Danny really had that in their vision when they founded the company, but yeah, they were pretty smart guys, and it's possible that they were thinking about cybersecurity even then.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, when we think about internet applications, and it's in a lot of, honestly, a lot of developers that I know as well, like, for example, user experience developers, front-end developers, they really don't think about how it is physically possible to bring this much information to a customer who is, like you said, anywhere in the world.
Right.
And so all these infrastructure tools exist to make this stuff happen, which is pretty cool. I have a little bit of background in infrastructure, not going to pretend I know nearly as much as you, but still, I value it. You know what I mean? I think it's just fascinating. When you talk to customers today, you mentioned that they're now thinking and leaning more towards hey, how do you protect this data as it's flowing back and forth? How do you, DDoS overloads on my network?
Yep.
Do they do they still have an appreciation for the leaps and bounds you guys are making? Or has it become one of those things where it's well, I'm always going to have a big conduit. I'm always going to have a big pipe. I'm always going to have big CDNs that I can just I don't understand, where they're not, I don't want to say not as valuable, but it's just because they need the service, but do they understand some of the leaps and bounds you guys are making? Is it impacting their business? Can they notice it?
Yeah. I think more and more they really see these two things together: power and protect, performance and protection. Because in a more traditional approach where maybe you're buying boxes or something like that, oftentimes cybersecurity can get in the way of performance. It actually slows things down, and your end users, your customers, your employees end up with a bad experience. And whenever your employees or your customers are getting a bad experience from a performance point of view, obviously that's a negative thing. And it makes it harder to adopt the key security mechanisms that you really need to protect yourself. So whenever you have security and an experience running counter to each other, that's a huge problem. What we've done is we've built our performance products and our security products on the same platform. It's one platform. And so the same platform that protects also provides performance. The same platform that provides performance also protects. So the two things work together. And I think that's something that is very much appreciated by the customer base. Because again, if you adopt security in a way that hinders performance, it just won't get adopted. So you've got to bring the two things together and find an approach that gives you security and performance. So that's why we say power and protect together.
What industries are leaning on these types of technologies the most? I'm guessing media and entertainment, in gaming, because everything's gone through like the streaming models. And there's, when I think of gaming, there's probably more transactions happening in gaming than ever before, right? There's now like the demand for delivering content and experience to customers live and in real time. What other industries, that's just my guess. I didn't know, what industries are you seeing like constantly pushing Akamai, like your team, like, hey, I need more capacity, Robert, like the Bobby, I need more, like this has got to go up.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Media and entertainment, obviously has been a huge vertical for us, both from the point of view of scale and performance, but also security. But now increasingly, you also see, finance and e-commerce and many other industries, healthcare, where
healthcare,
performance really matters. But increasingly now they are coming under attack. The attackers, say 5 to 10 years ago, we really thought of them in terms of, you had the kind of hacktivists, groups like Anonymous, who were kind of trying to make a point. And, you obviously didn't want to be targeted by them, but the world today is very different, where now you've really got a financial motive in the picture. The criminals have found a way to make money with cybercrime, and not only make money, but do it in a scalable fashion. They've got the tools, the mechanisms, the business model, if you will, the criminal business model that allows them to scale and make money in cybercrime. And that means that everybody now becomes a target. And not surprisingly, you've seen the headlines over the course of 2021.
Sure.
They weren't targeted at any one vertical. They're targeted anywhere the criminals can make money. And that wasn't just an anomaly for 2021. That was an inflection point that we're going to see going forward. And so it's not confined to any one vertical. It's really the attackers are going after any organization where they can make money.
Would you say that's where more of your energy is now spent? How would you say your day is cut in terms of which product lines to focus on? Because obviously you can't do all things all the time evenly, right? So you have to split your time. Give us an idea of where what are you guys prioritizing right now? It sounds like cybersecurity is near the forefront. I'd love to hear how you think of the product blend that's going to come out over the next, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah. Cybersecurity is a big focus. It's the fastest growing part of our business. It's now well over $1 billion annually. And as I said, growing rapidly. And I think there's just as a business for us, there's an enormous opportunity because it's not going to go away, especially now that the criminals have really found a scalable business model. It's not going to go away. It's only going to grow. And therefore the needs are obviously there. So we focus a lot there, so we'll continue to prioritize a lot of our organic development as well as our mergers and acquisitions activity in cybersecurity. I would also add to that, though, compute. I think compute becomes an increasingly large part of our business where our customers can run more and more of their application workload on our platform. So rather than having to provision compute themselves, they can provision it on our platform where it runs near their end users, near their customers, near their employees, and provides greater scale, greater performance, and a greater experience. And in some sense, allows them to customize their use of our platform. So in summary, cybersecurity, huge priority, probably number one. Shortly after that, compute.
There you go. And one of the things that because of where you sit inside the organization, I know that CTOs of big companies typically get presented with big ideas, big projects. Obviously, people want you to help them build what it is they're trying to accomplish. That puts you in a unique position to kind of have a preview of what a lot of companies are trying to bring to the consumer base in the next couple of years. What are some of the industries that you're just really excited about, like what they're trying to accomplish? Like how do you, and if you could explain that in a way that for someone who's not in the industry could understand, like how will this impact me as a customer? Give us an idea of some of the things that are coming. Are you seeing movement in the autonomous vehicle space? Are you seeing movement in the, healthcare space that is going to bring like rapid at-home testing? I know Theranos obviously is in the news a lot now because it's a total bust, but the hypothesis behind that is still something I hope people are chasing, which is better at-home care. I don't know. Certainly a lot of people are pushing a lot of things towards, asking of you. I'm curious, where are certain industries you're seeing like you think they're going to make groundbreaking innovations in the next couple of years for us as consumers?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that for those of us who work at decent sized enterprises, there's a fundamental rethinking of how enterprises sort of architect themselves and how they serve their employees, as well as their customers. Some of that has really been accelerated by, of course, the pandemic and the fact that we're all working from home, or many of us are, and probably will continue to work a substantial portion of our business, of our work lives at home, maybe indefinitely, as well as this rise in ransomware and the rise in cyber criminality. Those things I think have accelerated a trend that was already there. Yeah. And the way I characterize it is by and large breaking down the old notion of a boundary where an enterprise had some notion of a perimeter, and you were either working in the enterprise or you're working outside the enterprise. And that really breaks down in a world where, if you think about it, your applications now live in the cloud somewhere. They're not on-prem. They certainly, increasingly, they're not on-prem. And I don't think we're far from a world where the vast majority of applications are not on-prem. They're in the cloud. Right. Employees expect to work anywhere. You can work from home. You can work from the road. You can work from a customer site. You can work from a conference. You can work from, some point we'll go back into the office. You can work from the office. You can work from anywhere. So the notion of, sort of on and off doesn't really make any sense. And so the notion, I think what we're seeing is this evolution toward a perimeterless world where applications can live anywhere and employees can work from anywhere. And the way you want to glue all that together, your applications and your employees, is no longer with a private network, but rather it's with end-to-end access mechanisms. You hear language like zero trust. It's not a term I love. I don't love the word zero trust, but the concept is the right concept, which is that you have endpoints and you want to control the conversation between those endpoints. What users can speak to which applications can speak to which other applications, and so on. All that has to be tightly controlled. And you really think of it as endpoint to endpoint, not on network versus off network. I think that's actually a huge change in the way that enterprises work. And I think it's a good thing for employees, because I think it makes it easier for employees to embrace this work from anywhere concept, which I think is really the world we're going to be in indefinitely going forward.
No, I couldn't agree more. Everyone wants to, it's probably one of the top search terms in Indeed now, right? Where people want to know who lets me work anywhere. Yeah. And with that idea, this perimeterless, are you seeing also more enterprises like work together to like kind of co-build experience? Like you said, maybe it's not a product anymore. Maybe it's like an experience. Like you're going to be able to use this product to do this thing. And people are just trying to, because we heard from, for example, we had a guest on from the office of the CTO at Google, and they're talking about like their number one job is to take companies to mash them together and figure out new solutions that, of course, benefit people like you and I on a regular basis. Are you seeing more activity in that place where more companies are collaborating? Like, hey, we can build something together.
Yeah, I think there's always a desire to work in sort of these larger contexts. And I think that's one of the exciting things about being in an enterprise is not only the colleagues that you get to work with in your own enterprise, but the opportunity to then extend your frontier out to your customer base, but also to partners. And I think more and more people find, more things can get done in a partnership context. And oftentimes, even organizations that compete on one dimension will cooperate on another dimension. And that's a nice thing to see as well. And more, I think this architecture where it's a perimeterless architecture and you put in place the right end-to-end protections and the right end-to-end mechanisms, actually can facilitate that kind of cooperation and collaboration. The old mechanisms were really very clunky. I think today we have much better ways of thinking about it. You mentioned Google, by the way, and I mentioned zero trust. They were early on that. They did this thing called Beyond Corp long before anybody used the word zero trust. And really, Beyond Corp was actually what today is called zero trust. It's a great idea, and it's an idea that I think a number of other organizations are now embracing. We certainly are. We not only have a product line that is really all about zero trust, but we also implement it in our own environment. So as an Akamai employee, I no longer really think about on-net versus off-net. I simply access applications according to what I have permission to access. We even, by the way, go so far. I know I'm going a little bit afield, but this is something that just triggered my thought, which is that we actually have this concept also of thinking about our office buildings, really sort of like private coffee shops with great Wi-Fi. Meaning that even when I go into the office building and I connect to the Wi-Fi at the office building, I'm not in any sense on the network. I'm still like, it's exactly the same as if I was in Starbucks, just with a bunch of my colleagues. And I use the remote access mechanism that I use at home, even when I'm in the office building. So in some sense, all access is remote access, no matter where I am. And I'm very fond of this metaphor of thinking about the office building of the future as a private coffee shop with great Wi-Fi, because I really think that's where we're headed. You go to the office building for a reason. You don't just do it by default because you woke up in the morning and of course you go to the office building. That's the world we used to live in. Now you do it for a reason, and you do it because you want to work face to face with your colleagues. You want to share a meal together. You want the conviviality of your peers. And in doing so, it's not unlike working from a private coffee shop. Just, hey, you've got your colleagues next to you, and there's no reason that you need to architect the network any differently, really. And that's a very freeing and enabling concept when you start thinking of all access as remote access, and you start thinking about the office building as really a private coffee shop with great Wi-Fi.
No, I like that. I mean, I think that's exactly what's going to happen. We're seeing that so much. And by the way, as long as it being someone from the media entertainment place, I want you to know that the number one thing that media people want is upload speed. It's not the download. They need upload speed. So like I could see that, especially in media companies, because most public Wi-Fi's, they really control upload. So that's what prevents people in media. It sounds crazy, but people in media, we've had CIOs of like Fox, NBC. They talk about like when they stream or when they go to create live broadcasts and stuff. That's why they have to bring all their own equipment and gear, because it's like there's no such thing as, you can't just tap into a public network and go upload fast enough. When you think about building this infrastructure of the world, this perimeterless world, we also know in tech, recruiting is becoming like recruiting is one of the biggest challenges in the industry right now. We got a limited supply of very, very good engineers. A lot of companies want very good engineers. You are one of them. Talk about recruiting and like how you guys approach acquiring talent to build this world. Do you see a lot of people that are interested in this segment, like the back-end infrastructure segment? Do you see people that want to do this? Is it something that takes convincing? I'd love to understand like what recruiting is like for you guys. Yeah,
obviously, recruiting great talent is, well, it's important, I think, for everybody.
Yeah.
Obviously, one approach is we're in lots of different locations, and increasingly now in this world where we can work from anywhere, we can also recruit from anywhere. Obviously, subject to making sure that you're dealing with the appropriate laws and things like that. But I think the notion of being able to work from anywhere also means recruit from anywhere. That opens up the aperture. But for us, a big factor really is culture. We want to recruit people that are going to contribute not only to the products themselves, but also to the culture. I think it's less a fact. It's less about, okay, a checkbox of a bunch of specific skills, and more about, do you really fit in with this culture, and can you work with these people, and can you have fun with these people, and develop collaboratively with these people. So a lot of job skills can be learned over time and can be developed on the job. Again, the culture fit is important, and the people who are who are curious and really have this approach of lifelong learning, I think can make a big difference. So I try and think of recruiting and sort of the job search as less about checking the right boxes and more about, do you have the right personality, culture, and are you going to fit in with this company and be able to do great things as an organization, not as an individual?
Yeah, I mean, it makes total sense. We hear that a lot, actually, coming from different tech companies, because of course you're building the future. So some of the skills you will need, you might not know to test for yet, right?
Exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah.
When you think of, so one of the things I joke, we had a network specialist on once, and I joke, well, how much better will the user experience be if you go from 5G to 10G? I made that up, but like the idea that have we reached in a point where people can't quite, beyond cybersecurity? Of course, cybersecurity is always going to need more and more improvements, but one of the things that Akamai does is like that speed concept. What new technologies or experiences do you think are going to be unlocked along with the innovations that you guys are developing? Because when we think of AR, it feels like it's coming, or soon to be here. The level of gaming we're now experiencing. Now I'm watching TV with 8K cameras. Like, right. I don't know what's happening. You know what I mean? How much better can it get? Are we going to be able to, and one of the things that we had another guest on, he talked about was like, he's like, one of the things he hopes to unlock is like this idea that you can do, scientific discovery on like DNA strands live in the cloud, like a Google Doc. And I'm like, well, how hard is that? He's like, you will not believe how hard that is. And so I was curious, like some of the things that you're maybe really bullish on, exciting about that are coming out because of these things that you're unlocking.
Well, I think in general, the power of connectivity is enormous. And it wasn't that long ago where connectivity was really confined to, you had to go into your office building to have any decent connectivity. What you had at home was probably nearly useless if you had anything at home. Then you got to the point where, okay, people were starting to get some things at home, and you had reasonable connectivity. You could start to see sort of maybe a low quality video. Maybe you were starting to watch, little video clips and things like that. And you could do that from home. You could also shop from home. And then, of course, really, you had this sort of broadband explosion. And we're now at the point where online from home, we're really office, wherever you are, as long as you have reasonable wired connectivity, you can do really high quality experiences, including what we're doing right now. Thank goodness this pandemic is happening now instead of 10 years ago. 10 years ago, we would not have had these tools at our disposal to stay connected in the way that we have. So, I've often thought about that. I mean, how disastrous would it have been for our kids and their learning experience and our professional lives if this pandemic had happened 10 years ago before the invention of this kind of connectivity? I think what we still see lacking is sort of the mobile connectivity. Great at home, great in the office, but as you move around, you still suffer, I think, in terms of
tower to tower.
And while the cost of connectivity has gone way down, almost anything that gets any benefit from connectivity can be connected. There is the question of at what quality, and of course, then there's also the question of protection. Increasingly, also as we work from home, we're using consumer grade devices to manage our work conversation and manage our work interaction. Those consumer grade devices and IoT, these things, notoriously are bad from a security point of view. And, I think that's another area where I think there's some hope that over time, these things can get better and we can find a point where from anywhere you can get great connectivity and do it safely.
Yeah. I mean, I see that completely. And, like I mentioned before, one of the things I'm personally hopeful of it's not going to be with just Akamai, but it's going to be a host of new technologies that are emerging around the world, is I'm imagining a world where, imagine things like where we're going through right now, where viruses and disease states of people could they become open source? Could they become where every doctor in the world could collaboratively within my hospital, within my pharmaceutical company? I got to figure out something on our side because we got to patent it together so that we could possibly do something with it. But this new bandwidth, this new ability to deliver data to the edge faster anywhere. And if network follows, connectivity follows, like, could that be? Because I think part of why software specifically has developed so fast is the fact that so many people could access it quickly and contribute. I think that's been something that's probably not true in the medical field because I think things are more isolated, but we're soon getting to the point where this might be unlocked. I don't know. I'm hopeful for it though.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. I mean, not only data sets, large data that's available and can be accessed from anywhere, but also, as you mentioned, software stacks. we now have just this incredible wealth of open source and available software stacks build significant capabilities very quickly. When I first started programming, really the only things that we used in terms of libraries, you had standard IO, you had libc, and that was pretty much it. Nowadays, the wealth of libraries that are out there means that you can be so much more productive, so much more agile, and build really incredible things. And you combine that with connectivity and the availability of data, it opens up a lot of frontiers.
Yeah, I remember hearing how large the files are for there were I don't want to say the number because I think I understated actually, but just medical imaging records, how big of a file that is. Right. It's actually quite difficult to put it anywhere for a collaborative work environment. So these kinds of technology can unlock so many crazy things. I think with the advent of more probably augmented reality experiences where people can train remotely as well in the medical field, I think it's going to be amazing, right? If we think about it, kind of like you were saying, how did education done pre-internet in an event of a pandemic? I mean, you and I would have to walk to our kids' school. Our teacher would have to go to school because they need a center point, a hub, to prepare the assignments, maybe lay them out in folders. Yeah. We'd have to walk over, pick them up, drop them off, and then walk back the next day to find out if our kid was doing okay or not.
Yeah. I honestly don't have no idea what we would have done, if this pandemic had hit 10 years ago. As bad as it is now, I think we can be thankful that we have the connectivity nearly ubiquitous that we have today that's allowed us to maintain some semblance of interaction, community, and of course, in the case of our kids, education.
There you go. Well, Bobby, it was awesome having you on the show. Thanks for sharing a lot about what you're up to at Akamai, what you've been doing over your career. But before you go, it is time for the lightning round. The lightning round is brought to us by Salesforce Platform, the #1 cloud platform for digital transformation of every experience. Bobby, this is where we ask you questions outside of the realm of work so our audience can get to know you a little bit better. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay, so we looked you up on Twitter, and you got a great Twitter profile, okay? We'll link it up in the show notes below. It says you are an aspiring drummer, a bass player, and a juggler, so that opens up some doors for some questions. You clearly like music.
I do.
Let's start with the instruments. Which one are you better at? Are you a better drummer or are you a better bass player?
Well, I didn't grow up with anything I didn't grow up playing an instrument or anything like that. But as I had kids, I decided I really want them to have that as part of their experience. So my wife and I made the decision we would make music education just a mandatory part of their education.
Nice.
Just like math is not optional, English is not optional. And so they all play. So I thought, well, okay, what an opportunity for me. Maybe I should participate. So I started taking drumming lessons, had a great time. I developed this weird thing that's a long story that I won't tell, but I developed this weird condition called focal hand dystonia.
What does that mean?
It's hard to explain, but it means basically that my left hand won't make certain motions. It's weird. And in most, I can run my life just fine. I can type, I can do I can work my left hand just fine. But the specific motion of this, which you need as a drummer, I cannot make that motion with a drumstick in my hand. And it developed over time. And it got to the point where I just couldn't continue to advance drumming. So I thought, okay, let's try bass. And it's also the one instrument that none of my kids play. So I figured if I add bass, we could have a family band. And I'm always looking for things we can do as a family, like a family activity. So, all right, if I learn bass, we got a family band. So I started taking bass lessons. It turns out it's also affecting it's my left hand. So it's the fretting hand. Mm-hmm. And so it's actually giving me some trouble. I can play bass okay. But at some point, the focal hand dystonia gets in the way. So I think my musical career is pretty limited, but I do have fun with it. I'm a pretty rudimentary player, both on drums and on bass, but I enjoy it, and it lets me participate with the kids as a family band, which is super fun. Yeah. And by the way, the focal hand dystonia doesn't affect juggling at all.
That's the other thing. So you can juggle.
Yeah, that motion is not affected by the focal hand dystonia. I'm not an especially good juggler, but I learned when I was in high school, I don't know why, but when I was in high school, I just learned the basic 3-ball cascade juggling. And then when the pandemic hit, I made the decision that, all right, I want to learn how to juggle clubs, because I never had learned, juggling clubs. I'd never learned that, and it takes some practice. And so I did, and then I just continued. So I've added 4-ball juggling to the repertoire. I've added a few tricks with the clubs. I've added a lot of tricks with 3 balls, mills, mess, and pullouts, and all kinds of 3-ball tricks. And And I just continue. By the way, it's also a great hobby from the point of view that I can do this anytime, pretty much anywhere. As much as I love things like skiing and water skiing, those aren't activities I can do every day, especially living in Cambridge. Whereas juggling is like, hey, I got 5 minutes free. I can just go to the other side of this right over there, pick up the balls or pick up the clubs and juggle a little bit. It's been a lot of fun. Yeah.
When you walk around the office, do you ever juggle while walking around? Do people at your office know you have this skill?
Some do, I think. I really got more into this when the pandemic started, though. So not so much at the office. As I said, I learned when I was in high school, I could do a basic 3-ball cascade, a couple of tricks, but didn't really do it as a hobby. I just had it kind of something I had learned. It wasn't until the pandemic started that I was like, all right, let's do this. That's awesome.
How about for music? You go back to it. What kind of music do you like listening to?
Oh, I mean, I'm an old Deadhead. I still listen to the I love the Grateful Dead channel on Sirius XM. But yeah, I listen to a lot of other sort of, I guess what today might be called classic rock or things like that.
How about your kids when they want to jam with you? What do you guys like to play?
Well, I make them play just basic, like sort of classic rock stuff, the Beatles, the Stones and things like that. It's not what they love. To be honest, they don't love particular bands, sort of like we did when we were little. They're all, musicians. In fact, my oldest son, who's applying to college, is applying to performing arts programs and wants to, he does some singing and dancing. He's a great break dancer. So he's actually kind of into the performing arts. He's a pretty good guitar player and also does some songwriting. So he's the one probably embracing it the most of my 3 kids. But yeah, the family activity is just awesome.
Dude, that is awesome, man. I'm with you. The way I teach my kids is I'm a personal believer that, a sound mind travels in a sound body. So like I make my kids do physical things. I want them to do intellectual puzzle solving things. I'd love for them to be more creative, but they're all definitely really young now. I don't know when I should push them into doing some of the, more other disciplines. Like my daughter Isla, I'm like, you should do this, and she's like, I want to just color. Right. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, there's only so much influence we have, but yeah.
So we looked you up on LinkedIn. You went to 3. It looks like we have you as 3 different schools. Is that right? MIT, Brown, and University of Texas.
Yeah, I was a undergraduate at Brown, did my PhD at MIT, and then for 4 years, I was on the faculty at the University of Texas. Loved all 3 of them. They were all great experiences in different ways.
What did the teaching experience teach you?
Yeah, it's actually one of the things I pride myself on is being able to explain complicated technical things to almost any audience. And I think I did learn some of that skill from my teaching experience. I also had just a great advisor in graduate school who was a master at that, Charles Lyserson, who you may know as one of the authors of the famous Algorithms book that a lot of people use in college or in grad school. Charles was just a great advisor from that point of view, and he just worked with me just so diligently to learn how to express technical concepts to an audience of any type.
No, that is awesome. Yeah, I can. So I wanted to ask you about that because I noticed like your level of enthusiasm is super high. And, I was just imagining that, teaching a tough subject like comp sci, like, at minimum, it's nicer if I could hear from someone that's more enthusiastic. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah. Oh, I'm definitely, I am enthusiastic. I do love doing it for sure.
And last but not least, we've met a lot of different people throughout the years of the show, but I think you might be the only grandson of an entertainer. I believe so. You have a famous grandfather. You are the grandson of Jack Benny, legendary American comic. Did you have a good relationship with him? Like, do you have stories of him?
Oh yeah. I was only 10 when he died. So it's not like, I knew him all that well, but he was granddad. And, I remember, he was a big baseball fan and he used to take me to Dodger games. And that was kind of my first experience being aware of how famous he was. Cause, it was besides I was a huge baseball fan and I loved going to the games, but yeah, going with Jack Benny meant, we were hanging out with the owner of the team. We could go down to the dugout and meet the players and all sorts of things like that. And people would be asking for autographs. It wasn't intrusive like things might be today, but and he loved being recognized and being a celebrity. I think he loved the fans and loved signing autographs and loved talking to fans. He really, really enjoyed all of that. But yeah, my overriding memories really would be, he was granddad and baseball games and things like that were a treat.
Oh, that is awesome. Yeah, that's cool that he kept that experience with you personal. You know what I mean? And we always love hearing stories like that. Bobby, it was awesome having you on the show. Thanks for sharing your unique background. I can tell, like, I don't know if that's where you got your like level of passion for music and juggling, but it's like your granddad was a performer. You feel like a performer. You're definitely a coder. You're super enthusiastic. Thanks for sharing some of the things that you're working on to, we already talked about before. If you're not familiar with Akamai, go ahead and check them out. We'll link all the links below in our show. This is a tool, this software and hardware stack, actually, it's everything, right? is literally used by just about every application you touch. Like there's really, I can't think of, I would be shocked if there's a consumer product out there that it's not flowing through Akamai somewhere.
Yeah, many of your favorite online apps, your online experiences for sure, yeah.
Yeah, I would be shocked. It's like something like completely in its own ecosystem. I don't know. Because at bare minimum, we use telco. So if you use telco to get internet, somewhere along the line, Akamai's there. It's got to be. There's no way around it.
Yep.
Bobby, thanks for joining us today on IT Visionaries.
Awesome. Thanks, Albert. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.